I'm Curtin Davina, reading for reviewer Steve Watts. Minecraft represented a massive paradigm shift in games, having served as a popular proto-example of both early access release and unstructured, creation-based gameplay. More than a decade later, Minecraft Dungeons doesn't strive toward revolutionary, but it may just use the now familiar trappings of its namesake to introduce a new generation of players to old-school tropes. The dungeon crawler is a light, breezy introduction to the genre for newcomers and a friendly, low-impact callback for veterans. Those experienced with games like Diablo or Torchlight already know the basic gist. You venture from a hub area into various environments, battle enemy hordes, occasionally fell some larger-than-life boss monsters, and then spend time laying out and sorting through your new loot like a kid who just opened a pack of baseball cards. Within that framework, there is some simplification in Minecraft Dungeons, which helps to make it more inviting. You only have 6 gear slots: melee, bow, armor, and 3 artifact-based abilities. You won't find specialized classes or complex skill trees here. Everything is tied to your armor sets, and the level ups mostly matter in that they determine the quality of your loot drops. That loot rains down constantly, sometimes a sprinkle, but more often a monsoon, which means you'll be constantly swapping your weapons and armor sets. Minecraft Dungeons is far more precious with its gear, so it's not uncommon to find yourself switching 3 or 4 times in a single stage. At first, these upgrades appear pretty linear, replacing a sword with a new, stronger sword. But before long, the enchantment system comes into play, which provides dungeons with its strategic depth. Enchantments are specialized upgrades to each of your primary pieces of gear. Each level up gives you an enchantment point to select one from a handful of passive buffs, but you earn back your spent points whenever you salvage a piece of equipment that's already been enchanted. In the early game, when a weapon might only have 1 enchantment slot and fairly vanilla buffs, these are nice bonuses but don't significantly impact how you approach the game. As you progress later, these become instrumental in adding depth and a difficulty ramp. Finding more complex enchantment combinations can make the difference between a brittle build or a powerhouse. That also makes the search for new loot both thrilling and progressively more thoughtful. Since you earn your enchantment points back for salvaging, swapping out a new piece of gear means you can enchant it with several upgrades from the start. The late game is a series of constant trade-offs, finding your rhythm with a new set of abilities and buffs before exchanging them for something completely different. While enchantments make the combat strategically complex, the moment-to-moment gameplay is relatively simple. Most melee attacks don't stagger opponents, so there's no weight or impact to hits. You'll often just hit enemies as they hit you, like a couple of rock'em sock'em robots, until one of you falls down. The melee weapons are well differentiated by their attack speed and range, but that's basically all. Melee battle can also feel a little unfair when you're surrounded by mobs and unable to move, especially if you find yourself dropped there by surprise from a jump pad. Sometimes the simplicity of the combat can get in its own way. You can pick up TNT boxes as random drops and carry them around with you for when you need a quick area of effect attack, but the throw command is set to the same button as the ranged attack. That makes it impossible to fire an arrow without getting rid of the TNT boxes you may have been saving, and the two don't really serve the same function. This just means you have to sacrifice your AoE availability anytime you need the precision of an arrow, or anytime you forget in the heat of the moment, which happened to me more times than I can count. Minecraft Dungeons is short on its default difficulty setting. Completing default opens up adventure mode with higher level enemies and better loot, and completing adventure opens apocalypse. The game is built around relatively short, self-contained, repeatable stages, each with difficulty sliders. Adventure mode starts to roll out gear with more powerful abilities. That both provides more incentive to keep hunting better loot on the higher difficulty, and gives you something to do with excess enchantment points. This emphasis on finding loot comes at the expense of the in-game economy, because despite finding gems frequently throughout dungeons, there just isn't much use for them. You can spend them to roll a random piece of gear at your camp, but it hardly ever stacks up to the gear you've already found, and turning unwanted gear to salvage only gets you a fraction of your money back. As a result, it's not really worth it, and there's nothing else to spend your hard-won gems on. The stages themselves are Minecraft accurate, carrying over an aesthetic made of parts that are clearly recognizable to anyone who has spent time in the block building game. The Minecraft spirit is also carried through mobs themselves. Classic enemies like creepers or skeletons are among the first you'll see, and sometimes the stage will darken for a randomized visit from the Enderman as a mini-boss encounter. Dungeons also find ways to create its own bits of Minecraft identity, like the addition of the adorable Key Golem. The co-op works without a hitch, offering an easy way to join up with friends or guide less experienced players through tough challenges. Gear can be concentrated in different directions, with emphasis on elements like healing or damage mitigation, which could theoretically allow a very well-coordinated team replicate the standard tank healer DPS model. Realistically though, a team will be comprised of several single-player builds, and simply having partners work to help mitigate some of the crowd control issues that exist when going solo. A few smart inclusions like color-coded loot and quick teleport tool make it simple to stay together and let everyone enjoy their winnings. It is odd though that starting an offline game still functions like a connected one, including the inability to pause. Minecraft Dungeons is missing conspicuous parts of what gave the namesake its identity, most noticeably breaking through walls to explore underground caverns and using the found materials to craft. But maybe because of that, Dungeons shows how flexible the franchise has become. Rather than shift our expectations of what games can be, it's banking on its own popularity to introduce players to a classic genre they might not have tried before and serve as a short but sweet treat for looter vets.